Okay, so today we're going to dive deep into the new Fujifilm GFX100 RF.
The RF.
The RF.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been making some waves, and we've got some great sources here, from like a
Yeah.
first look kind of hands-on all the way
Uh,
to like a deep dive review, and then even a
yeah.
kind of like a don't sell your X100 kind of
Right. Yeah.
perspective.
Yeah. Exactly.
So uh, I think we've got a pretty well-rounded view of this camera from these early impressions and reviews. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and I'm really interested to kind of suss out what is so unique about this, who's it really for,
Yeah.
and what are the compromises that come along with all these
Yeah.
unique features and form factor and everything else.
For sure. Yeah. I think what's so interesting about it is right off the bat how they've managed to kind of inject that same Fujifilm DNA into a medium format camera. Like across all the sources, the immediate takeaway is like, oh, that looks like an X100.
It really does.
Yeah, like that rangefinder style is unmistakable.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny. Everybody brings that up right away.
Yeah.
And it's not just the looks. It's like even when you hold it, it's supposed to be
Right.
lighter than the GFX50R
Right.
and even the XH2S.
Which is wild for a medium format.
Wild.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like thicker and a little taller than an X100. So it's like
Yeah.
you get that vibe, but it's also like
Like it's its own thing too.
its own thing. Yeah.
It's not just a copycat. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And one person with larger hands even called out like that the grip was really good.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah. So that was kind of interesting too.
I feel like that's one of the things that Fujifilm really wanted to nail with this camera was to make it feel approachable.
Yeah.
Not just be like a medium format camera that's small, but to really make it a nice handling experience.
Yeah.
And then even getting into like materials. They've got the top plate, the lens ring dowels, and then the bottom plate. All of that's aluminum,
Okay.
which is, it's a step up from like the X100 series, which are more pressed materials.
Right.
So it feels like they really are, you know, putting it in that more premium category.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. They obviously want to kind of position it that way, and also speaking of the X100, another thing that it kind of borrows from
Yeah.
X100 is that nice and quiet leaf shutter,
Oh, nice.
and it's supposed to be much quieter
Really?
than like the 50, the Mark II, 50S, and the S2.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah, for people who like to shoot street or just in general like a quieter,
Yeah.
shooting experience, I imagine that's a big deal.
Absolutely. I think that speaks to kind of the way that they want the camera to be used as well.
Yeah.
Like something a little bit more observational, a little less intrusive.
Right, right.
But yeah.
And of course it comes in black, but it also comes in a kind of two-tone silver, which
Yeah.
is pretty cool.
It's pretty slick. Yeah.
So moving on from those first impressions,
Yeah.
let's talk about like the guts of it, the tech inside.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're dealing with the same 102 megapixel sensor and processor as like the other kind of flagships in the GFX line.
Right, right.
So crazy resolution, 16-bit color.
Amazing for editing.
Yeah, amazing for editing.
Yeah.
And it's paired with a 35 millimeter f4 lens.
Okay.
Now, people who are coming from full frame, that's about a 28 millimeter equivalent.
Yeah.
But the kicker is that,
Right.
on a medium format sensor, that f4 is acting a lot different.
It is. It is.
It's more like a 2.8 on full frame in terms of depth of field.
Right, which is, I mean, that's something that's really important to like wrap your head around when
Yeah.
you're thinking about this camera, because I think a lot of people would see f4 and be like, "Oh, well, that's not that fast."
Yeah.
But when you think about it on medium format and you compare it to what you're used to
Yeah.
on full frame, it's actually like it's a really interesting balance.
Yeah.
Because you're still getting that subject separation.
Right.
But you're getting a lot more of the environment than you would if you were shooting at 2.8 on a smaller sensor.
Right.
So it's a different way of telling the story with your images,
Yeah, yeah. And speaking of telling a story or composing a shot
Right.
in different ways,
Yeah.
Fujifilm has put some really cool features in here, and one of them that just like right away kind of stood out to me is the aspect ratio dial
Yes.
on the back.
That's so cool.
When you set it to C mode,
Yeah.
you can just like flip through, 4x3, 1x1, 7x6,
Yes.
expand. They even have a new 17x6.
Wow, that's awesome.
And one of the reviewers was just like so excited about that.
Yeah.
Like it really changes the way you think about
For sure.
composing the image.
Yeah. I love that they did that because it encourages you to think about it in the moment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Instead of being like, oh, well, I'll just crop it later.
Yeah.
It's like, no, how do I want to see this right now? And having those options there is huge.
And then they have this lever on the front of the camera that activates a digital teleconverter.
Oh, wow.
And because the resolution is so high,
Right.
you can crop in,
Right.
get, different fields of view.
Yeah.
And you can even choose whether you want to see the full frame and just a crop, like an overlay crop.
Right.
Or if you just want to see the cropped.
The cropped image.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really neat.
So you can go to something like a 45 millimeter equivalent, and you're still at like 61 megapixels.
Wow.
And then if you want to go to 63 or 80, you're at about 20 megapixels.
Gotcha.
Which is still
plenty.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, they're kind of going with this shoot first frame later kind of thing.
Right.
Which is not something you'd normally associate with medium format.
Right.
It's all about like
getting the most out of it.
Yeah, maximizing that sensor area.
Yeah.
But it's almost like the way they're approaching this is that they're saying, well, the real benefit of medium format now is just the amount of data that you get.
Right.
And having that flexibility to crop later.
Yeah, I mean, does that? I mean, what do you think about that? Is that like is that a compromise to you, or is that like a?
It's definitely interesting. Because like I can see the appeal of it.
Yeah.
Especially for certain types of photography. Like if you're out traveling and you want to be really light and you only want to bring one camera and one lens or one focal length in this case.
Yeah.
But then it does make you kind of wonder, like,
is
this really maximizing what medium format is about?
Yeah. I don't know.
It's a question for sure. It's a question.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Now they put in some other little features that are kind of cool. You can map the front ring to the film simulations.
Oh, nice.
Which is cool for the JPEG shooters.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that's something that Fujifilm is known for, and it's cool that they're bringing that into this camera as well.
Yeah, and then they have dual SD card slots, UHS 2.
Nice. That's a good feature to have.
Always good to have.
Especially if you're a professional or just really value the security of having that backup.
Yeah, for sure. And the battery is actually bigger than in the X100.
Okay.
It's the W235.
Okay.
And they're saying something like 820 shots per charge.
Oh, wow, that's a big step up.
So that's pretty nice.
Yeah.
But not everything's perfect, right? We got to talk about the things that are missing.
Of course.
And the biggest one, and everybody brings this up, is the lack of IBIS.
That's a big one.
It's a big one, and I'm sure it contributes to the weight and the battery life and all that stuff. But especially with a sensor, this high resolution, you really need.
You're gonna have to be careful about your shutter speed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it just goes to show that it's not really intended to be like a hybrid camera. You know, it's really all about stills.
Yeah.
Because IBIS is so crucial for getting nice, smooth handheld footage.
Right. And it also doesn't have an OVF.
Oh, interesting.
It's EVF only.
Okay.
No built-in flash.
Okay.
And then the other thing that was brought up is, we've got that fixed lens.
And while we talked about how it's a really interesting look on medium format and kind of a nice balance, it's still f4.
Right.
So you're not going to get that super shallow depth of field that some people want from medium format. The swirly bokeh and all that stuff.
That really, really out of focus background.
Yeah. So
that's interesting, because I do feel like a lot of people who buy into medium format, one of the things that they really want is that super shallow depth of field.
Yeah.
So to kind of bake that into the camera and say like, no, this is how we see it is pretty bold.
It's a bold move.
Yeah.
So how about handling and ergonomics? Like what's the overall
Yeah, so it seems like from what people are saying, it's pretty familiar
Yeah.
to Fujifilm users who are used to the X series cameras. One person did mention that maybe the thumb grip on the back isn't as pronounced as they
Okay.
might like. So it's possible that maybe
Right.
third-party grip manufacturers might come out with something.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
And the screen tilts.
yeah, it tilts. It does
System.
fully articulate. Yeah.
Which, I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah.
They're really going for that
Yeah.
photography-centric
Yeah.
kind of experience. And a
Yeah.
tilting screen is useful for a lot of stuff. But,
Yeah.
I'm sure if they'd made it fully articulating, it would have added to the weight and all that.
So, like, who is this camera for?
Yeah.
Who's gonna buy this?
So it seems like it's being positioned as like a premium
Okay.
travel
Okay.
on location stills camera,
Okay. Okay.
and it seems like it would appeal to people who are already shooting Fujifilm
Right.
and they want to get into medium format.
Right. But they don't want like a big
big
bulky GFX camera.
right.
So it's kind of like bridging that gap between the X series and the bigger
Yeah.
GFX bodies.
I mean that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And it seems like it would be great for like BTS stills, street photography,
Mm-hmm.
even,
Right.
making art, people who are into
Yeah.
making prints and that kind of thing.
Sure. For sure.
And I mean, you think about the cropping, the teleconverter, all that. It's really like you have multiple focal lengths in one camera.
You do, and I think that's something that's really appealing to people who are, into street photography or any kind of photography where you need to be quick,
Yeah.
and discreet,
Right.
because you don't have to worry about changing lenses.
Right.
You can just kind of crop in and get the shot that you need.
And I think it's pretty clear that it's meant for stills.
Yeah.
Yes. More than video. Even though it can shoot video.
It can, but it's
not its primary focus.
right.
Yeah.
Now we have to talk about the price.
Okay. Yeah.
$4,899.
Yeah, that's not an insignificant amount of money.
It's not cheap.
Yeah, so it is interesting because they're kind of going with that all-in-one approach.
Right.
You get the body, you get the lens.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
So you don't have to worry about buying extra lenses and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So that is something that could potentially be appealing to people who just want to,
A simple setup.
a simple setup.
Yeah.
And they don't want to have to invest in a whole bunch of different gear.
Yeah. And speaking of simple setups, there's the X100 VI,
Right.
which is
A lot cheaper.
much cheaper.
Yeah. And it has IBIS,
His IBIS, which is
which is a big deal.
huge. Yeah.
So it's like they're both kind of in this
Yeah.
similar world of like
Right.
compact cameras, but they're
Yeah.
very different
They're very different. Yeah.
in what they offer.
You get the IBIS with the X100, but you don't get that medium format sensor.
Right.
You don't get the cropping ability.
And you don't get that unique look.
And you don't get that unique look. Exactly. Yeah.
So
It's interesting, I feel like this is probably the closest we've seen to a truly approachable medium format camera.
Yeah.
I think it's going to appeal to a lot of people who maybe were intimidated by medium format before.
Right.
And just thought that it was too big.
Too much.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's something about it too that's kind of, it's just like
Yeah.
so intentional.
Intentional.
The fixed lens, the
Yeah.
aspect ratio dial. It's like it makes you slow down.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that's a welcome change of pace.
Yeah.
I mean, especially in today's world where everything is so fast paced and
Right.
Instant gratification and all that.
Right.
It's nice to have a camera that kind of makes you,
Yeah.
stop and think.
Yeah. Be deliberate.
Be deliberate. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the film simulations.
Yeah.
I mean that's a huge thing for Fujifilm.
Yeah.
And I imagine people who are into that are just gonna
Oh, yeah.
love this camera.
Gonna eat it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about that straight out of camera JPEG.
Yeah.
Getting it right in the camera and not having to spend hours editing.
Now we've kind of touched on some of these, but we
Yeah.
gotta talk about some of the downsides
Yeah.
or considerations, things that people need to think about.
Things to keep in mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Low light.
Yes, I think that's going to be a potential issue for some people,
Yeah.
especially with the f4 lens and the lack of IBIS.
Right.
Um, you're going to have to be really careful about your shutter speeds, and
Yeah.
if you're shooting in low light, you're probably going to have to bump up the ISO, which could introduce some noise.
Right. Right.
So yeah, it's something to be aware of.
And the whole idea of shooting first and framing later,
Right.
that might not sit well with some people.
Yeah, it's definitely a different approach,
Yeah.
and it's not something that everyone's gonna be into.
Yeah.
But I think it's a valid approach.
Yeah.
I think it's a way of getting more out of your camera.
Yeah.
And it's definitely something that I'm interested in trying out myself.
And then, going back to the depth of field,
Right.
even though it's different on medium format,
You're
it's still not
sure.
it's still not going to be that super shallow,
Yeah.
So if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah. If you really want that super blurry background,
Yeah.
this is not the camera for you.
Yeah, and also one of the reviewers brought this up,
Yeah.
which is really important, I think, with the electronic shutter
Right.
handheld.
Right.
You can get warped images.
Yeah, because it doesn't have a global shutter.
Yeah.
So you're going to want to stick with the mechanical shutter.
Yeah. So that's a big one to keep in mind.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So to kind of sum it all up,
Yeah.
the GFX100 RF it's a weird camera.
It's definitely unique.
It's a unique camera.
Yeah.
It's a rangefinder style. It's got that high resolution.
Yeah.
It's got the cropping capability. It's got that kind of
Yeah.
film simulation. It's got that kind of like film feel to it.
Right.
But it doesn't have IBIS. It's got a fixed lens.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like
It's making you make some choices. It's saying like this is what we are. This is what we're good at.
yeah.
If you want it, come and get it.
Yeah. And I think it's going to appeal to people who are really into that style of shooting and
It's not for everyone.
it's not for everyone. Yeah, but for the people that it is for, I think it's going to be amazing.
Yeah, I agree, and it's really cool that they're kind of pushing the boundaries
Yeah.
of what a medium format camera can be.
Yeah, I mean, I love that they're not just trying to make the same cameras that everyone else is making.
Right.
They're really trying to innovate and come up with new ideas
Yeah.
and I think that's great for the industry.
Yeah, and I think it makes us think differently about
Yeah.
how we approach photography.
Absolutely.
A- and so the last thing I want to kind of leave you with is this.
With the GFX100 RF, with that huge sensor, with the cropping, with all that, like how does this change
Yeah.
our idea of what a medium format camera is?
Yeah.
What does that mean for the future?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, and I think it's one that we're going to be talking about for a while.
Yeah.
I think it's a really exciting time to be a photographer because there's just so much innovation happening.
Yeah.
And I think Fujifilm is really leading the charge in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So,
Well, thanks for taking this deep dive with me.
absolutely. It was a good one.
Yeah, this was a fun one.
Yeah.
So until next time,
See ya.
take care.
Bye.